And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the only podcast in the entirety of the internet that is run by people who are doctors.
But not doctors.
I am your co-host, Dr. Patrick Armshaw.
And I am your co-host, Dr. Christopher Silverstein. We are here this week with both of us back.
Yeah, and both of us are co-hosts, which means no one is in charge.
No one is in charge. Nobody knows what's going on. So
it's pure anarchy over here. That's what I'm saying.
Well, it's pure anarchy outside, apparently, especially if you live in a bunch of different parts of America right now.
Some fun things to talk about today. It's going to be a really light episode, very fluffy, a lot of human interest stuff. Oh wait, no, what's that? I'm getting word through the thing in my ear that's saying that's not true at all. This is going to be terrible stuff we're talking about today.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, we consistently live through, or continue to live through, very complicated and interesting times, as the proverb once said. May you live through interesting times, and we are definitely in one of those times right now. But we should also clarify: I am back in the United Kingdom. And our last podcast, I was in America, in my childhood bedroom for the last time. And now we are back to at least being in the same country and city, but not in the same place, because we both have things going on. We both have full-time jobs and things like that. So we can't always be next to each other. But
you're always in my heart, Chris. So there you go.
And you always are in mine.
So, what's been going on? It's been a week. Obviously, we were hoping last week when we logged off that, we'd have a week of calm, quiet contemplation on behalf of the administration in the United States, that they just sort of reflect upon their choices and ask, how well is this all going?
We always wish for a week where we have very little to talk about. We have to think of something academic to discuss, where we have to cram and do a lot of homework and do a lot of reading, and be very different from the Department of Health and Human Services and just use ChatGPT to make up fake sources and citations. But we have yet to find a week like that. I think in our first few episodes, we were able to talk about some academic things, but
we mentioned this game theory. We had all talks about how legislatures work and
electoral systems.
I know. We had dreams of days gone by.
I hope someday that we can go back to having to think very hard about what we're going to talk about each week, and not just riff on the current state of disorder. Disorder.
Is that a System of a Down reference, Chris?
It very well may be.
I feel like you may have just pinpointed our ages for our audience, and so
and for myself. So without any further ado, given that I was just in the United States, let's give it some time to what's going on in the Free Republic of Trumpania. It's
well, I think we should probably start with the Battle of Los Angeles Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's see what happened, right? We had the Trump administration decide to use ICE to conduct sweeping immigration raids in Los Angeles. And it should be noted that this is in the immediate aftermath of reports coming out of Stephen Miller, who is more or less the guy in charge of the czar, so to speak, in charge of anti-immigrant activity by the administration, giving a meeting with the heads of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, saying, we need more arrests. We need to get the numbers up. We should be raiding Home Depots. In other words, it's no longer enough to go after, criminals or people who are a threat to the public. Instead, the idea is to just go after everybody.
Well, here's the thing, Patrick. I mean, this was clearly sold to the MAGA, right wing, the MAGA people who may, who are clearly not on board with all sorts of fascism. They just thought that they were trying to keep their country safe.
Right.
And what he said, and it was sold to them as, we're going after the criminals. They're eating your dogs. They're killing your pets. They're a threat to all of us, and we're only going to take out the bad ones. And that's all we're trying to do. So I don't understand why the left is trying to protect them. And boom, I'm sure we would have said on earlier episodes that obviously we're not talking about just the criminals, right? We're talking about everyone.
I
And
think we
here we
did
are.
make that point a few times. I think we
Yeah.
did kind of call that,
Yeah.
It's almost like that Dietrich Bonhoeffer guy knew what he was talking about with that whole
For the
first they
uninitiated,
came.
why don't you give us some insight as to Dietrich Bonhoeffer?
Yeah, just in case.
Just
So
in
Dietrich
case.
Bonhoeffer was I believe, a Lutheran pastor in the 1930s in Germany.
Is this the guy?
And yeah, so he ended up on the wrong end of the Gestapo. He was killed by the regime. But while he was in prison near the end of his life, which again was cut short by Nazis, he came up with a very sort of famous poem, basically, and
which we all would have heard of.
Well, that's the thing. First, they
came
came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. And then they came for the communists, and I did not speak up because I was not a communist. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. I mean, he had to go through that, but because he went through that, and we still have that poem, and people have been talking about it since that time it was, written, but specifically over the past 10 years, as immigration has become has become the main talking point of far right across the world, across the Western world. We are consistently reminded that they start small, and they always start small, and then they get huge, and they come after all of us.
Well, that's the thing. It's because you find the crack in the wall, and then you just start frying.
Yeah.
You start with the thin end of the wedge, but that just means they can get more wedge in there if you really start pushing. And I think this is a good opportunity to talk about one of the first things that we wanted to discuss, which is the role of political rhetoric in helping to make this happen.
Yeah.
So here's my sort of theory on this, Chris.
Okay.
American political rhetoric for the last several decades, certainly going back at least to the 1990s. And I'm going to say Newt Gingrich is probably like the guy who really put this into play.
Yeah.
Has been seen, like, it's been based around basically, especially from the right, not only from the right, but mostly I would say from the right, very, very wild and hyperbolic claims about the nature of politics and what is at stake. And I think most Americans understood that as being, hyperbole, right? So when Newt Gingrich is talking about like how the Democrats are all like, socialists, trying to, destroy freedom and seize your guns and whatnot, I think for most of the people who sort of engage in politics in America, right?
Yeah.
They saw that as being, well, it's rhetorical excess. Like he doesn't mean it. It's just, it's the kind of thing you say because it riles people up, but it's not real in a sense. And I think that because there's been no pushback on like the use of extremist rhetoric, we've seen it metastasize.
Yeah.
Consider when Gabby Giffords, a Democratic senator from I believe Colorado.
Arizona?
Was it? Wait, was it Arizona? Was it Colorado?
I think it was Arizona.
Arizona then. So a few days before she was shot by basically by a radicalized wacko, Sarah Palin had very famously put out sort of a political ad showing crosshairs over the superimposed over, I believe, the states where the sort of Democrats that she was against, Democrats in swing states, were, right? With the idea being, we're going to target them, we're going to take them out.
Yeah.
Now, some people said in the aftermath of this that maybe putting crosshairs and giving the implication of we should shoot these people, that this goes beyond normal political rhetoric, that this is not okay.
I mean, I'm of two minds about this. You know what I mean? Because we have like this issue with like Gingrich. I think you're right. So, I mean, this is when they really needed to get into very hyperbolic terminology, especially for going up against a charismatic president like Bill Clinton. And the economy was doing really, really well in the 90s in the United States after being, totally crap for so long.
Yeah,
and it was the very seeds of the tech boom were happening. The middle class was doing very well. I mean, the 90s was a great time to grow up. I we didn't have the internet for much of it, but we did have TGIF.
I know, it was a real golden era, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, but because we didn't have the internet, we just had talk radio. So I listened. My mother listened to a lot of talk radio back in the day, and that means I got to listen to a lot of Rush Limbaugh.
Now, Rush Limbaugh, how would you describe his use of political rhetoric, Chris?
Oh, Rush Limbaugh he would fit in well today. Like Rush Limbaugh is it's like in the past, think about Pat Buchanan and Rush Limbaugh. And this is my point. In the past, they were Rush Limbaugh wasn't fringe, but he definitely wasn't like deep into the Republican Party. And Pat Buchanan, who was effectively like a regular Republican today, was part of the fringe as well, because there were enough people in the middle of the party who were effectively pro-immigration. What they wanted was a small government, fewer taxes, and a little bit of social conservatism. I mean, that was pretty much it. And over time, just like you said, they've been eroded, and the people who were in basically the doomsayers and the Armageddon people, were out there saying, if you don't vote for us, the apocalypse is going to happen. The skies will rain with blood. The sun will turn into the
communists will seize control. And cats and dogs living together, the whole nine yards.
Yeah, but that's just it, because I think that part of the argument, that the right wing part of the argument, the fanatical side, they lost the communists, right? They lost their talking point. There was no more pinko communist scum, and there was
the Soviets are coming, and they're spreading money around to suborn our democracy. Instead, we have the Russian state spreading money around to suborn our democracy currently, but they're just not on the left anymore, are they? So
and so I think that but the hyperbole has definitely risen, and it's a question of like that targeting thing with when Gabby Giffords got shot. I understand where people are coming from, when they put that on there, but I do think that's just normal campaign political hyperbole when they put the targets on these people's faces. But if you I think it's everything leading up to that. When you have the NRA saying, we're going to support these people, they can take this gun out of my cold dead hands. Charlton Heston at the Republican National Convention, I think in 2008. So there are plenty of examples of like, of a coalescing or a concentration of this dangerous rhetoric that it's becoming less, fantastical and becoming more tomorrow. That might be it. And that's on the right. And on the left, they were just cruising. The Rutherford cruising. There was very little, outside of, protesters or pro-immigration people. I'm sorry, pro-environment people that, we got to blow up the cars and we got to turn off all the tap, like outside of that.
The animal liberation fronts, which is, I think, like 5 guys in a shed somewhere.
Exactly. Like as far as the left was concerned, it was it was very much, pretty calm, except for a guy named, Bernie Sanders, who was saying, we need to start taxing the billionaires and the millionaires tons and tons of money. And he was saying that in like 2004.
Yeah.
So hyperbole definitely on the right is completely out of control. And that basically started in the 90s.
Well, that's the thing. And I would even go so far as to say that the Republican Party has been willing to use this rhetoric to sort of give aid and comfort to actual honest to God extremists.
Yes.
And if we think back to the 1990s, for example, we're all familiar with the bombing of the Murray building, right, in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So this is the Oklahoma City bombing. This is Timothy McVeigh. This occurred during a time when you have G. Gordon Liddy, who was had his own radio show, talk radio host.
Yes, he did.
Saying things like, "When the feds come for you, aim for the head."
Yeah,
which is that's great. That's a great thing to be telling.
That's the kind of thing you just couldn't be said today. But it was just on talk radio, so your reach is going to be really minuscule, small. I mean, unfortunately, it still reaches people, But it's not like if he had put that on Twitter,
Right. Well, that's the thing. Then it would be. I disagree with you about a lack of reach, but I think instead it would just be much more public. You might reach the same number of people, but you're also going to be reaching a large number of people who are not already pre-selected to be on your side. So it's more like you would sort of see it. So so I guess the point here, right, is that the Republican Party has a long history of sort of using extremist rhetoric while also hiding behind the idea of, well, it's just, political hyperbole. This is all perfectly normal. But this is not a dog whistle that we're actually sending out to, the crazies. It's, this is all fine. And I think what we're seeing now is a real shift. And I think that shift is that they're starting to use that rhetoric and say, oh, no, this isn't hyperbole. This is actually how it is. So like, if you remember when Trump was running in 2016, a very famous phrase that was used about him is, the problem with liberals is that they take everything he says literally, but they don't take him seriously.
Yeah.
And what they need to do is to take him seriously, but not literally. Yeah. So when he says things like, Mexicans are rapists and whatnot, he doesn't literally mean that Mexicans are rapists. What he means is that immigration is a problem and we should take it seriously. And right. And the thing is, I think we're far enough into the future now to be able to say that has been completely falsified, that when they say things, they mean this literally. And the perfect example of this is the use of the term invasion to describe undocumented immigration.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and there's a bunch of things there. So for the first few weeks, we're talking about first few months, we're talking about invasion. And over the past few days, we've been talking about an insurgency in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
That brings us
rebellion.
To the next point. You've heard rebellion, insurgency, insurrection, right? These are three words that have been coming out of only Republican mouths and Republican talking point pieces over the past week. Now, when I was just in America, which was frankly yesterday, obviously these things were still going on, but I got a chance to watch Fox News. I did watch Fox News for 10 minutes. I just happened to turn it on because I wanted to see how they were dealing with everything. I mean,
how are they dealing with everything, Chris, would you say?
Well, next time I see you, I'm gonna show you a video that I took of Fox News, and basically I listened to other coverage, and I've been following coverage on social media. And Fox News basically covered it like this. They first started with some lady who used to work in the FBI or something, and now she's a contributor to Fox News. And she's saying, this is not going to be the George Floyd riots. This isn't going to be 2020. We're going to crack down these people, and they're all funded. And we got to stop them because this is an insurgency. This is a great disaster. I mean, she's treating it like there are waves of troops going through LA. She's treating it like LA is on fire, like in the Rodney King riots. She's treating it as if like Independence Day in the spaceship is hovering over,
the White House is in danger, and only Bill Pullman can save us.
He did save us.
Oh yeah, of course.
He did save us.
Because he was a pilot.
He was a pilot,
Chris.
When I was a pilot. Anyway, so and then they went on to this other guy who was like this ex-IDF consultant or fighter. I don't know. He was one of the two. And he's just like, these are the scenes that you see in other countries. Then you would see the army down here. This is an insurgency. And we're going to go after their backers. And we're going to go after the legislators. I mean, he was treating it as if like the city hall had been taken over by, masked rioters, and like they're broken into the city hall chambers. Right. I mean, he was treating it as if the city's already fallen. And frankly, if you have family there, you better just start carving out their tombstone now. And the problem is that they had a live feed on next to these guys. They weren't doing this in isolation. And basically you see this, all you saw were police walking on the street. And then you might see a person kind of in their area. But because what's going on in Los Angeles right now is, as far as I know, as of the recording of this, confined to just a few blocks, or the protesters keep on moving around. So it's not like a permanent, consistent protest, like January 6th, for example, which was only in one location and destroyed tons and tons of stuff very openly.
And got quite a few people killed.
And got a bunch of people killed.
And tore down an American flag to put up a Trump flag, and someone shat in the halls of Congress. So that was fun.
And there's lots of theft, looting, destruction,
breakage of windows. The kind of things that you might legitimately say constitute an insurrection against the democratically constituted Republican government of the United States. Yeah,
when they decide to attack the legislature during a process of certifying the president, that for me is a lot bigger deal than what's going on in Los Angeles right now. But
I mean, in terms of the number of people involved, in terms of the amount of damage that's being caused, in terms of the targets that are being targeted, I would say on basically every metric, January 6th is a much, much bigger deal than the protests are in Los Angeles. I don't think that's a reasonable person cannot argue against that at this point.
And the Republicans are working very, very hard to not talk about it. You got Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, saying, I'm not going to relitigate that. You got every Republican, Governor Pritzker from Illinois, who was one of the rare examples of a good billionaire. Governor Pritzker from Illinois, he was in front of, whatever House panel to, rake blue states across the coals. And Pritzker's no dummy, right? And he's just like,
he's a very smart guy.
Yeah, he's just I don't think what's going on. Here's what I think an insurrection is. I think when you attack the Capitol, like you were attacking this, that, and the other, just listed off January 6th, and you're just like, yeah, but that's an issue, right? And they're just like, we're not talking about that right now. I'm like, that's the worst possible argument to have. It's like, well, we're not talking about that. It's one of the biggest attacks upon our democracy, and they're just, and they know they can't talk about it because there's no defense for it, and yet here we are.
And of course, if you do talk about it, you also have to mention the fact that, what did Donald Trump do with these actually violent rioters who actually attacked cops, right? And the answer is he pardoned them all.
Oh, he pardoned them all, but let's not forget that he loves them all.
Mm-hmm.
And they should have, when they eventually sent them home, he gave them the orders to go home. That had been 3, 4, 5 hours into it.
Yeah. After he told them to go there in the first place, it should be pointed
out. He said he was going with them as well. He said he was walking with them to the Capitol.
Yep.
So that all notwithstanding, the issue what we're seeing here, combining hyperbole and what we're seeing in Los Angeles, because what we're seeing in Los Angeles is not this massive uprising of the people against the democratically elected government of the city or the state of Los Angeles.
Yeah, no, what we're seeing is protests against ICE being used to round up. Well, I mean, to round up. To round people up. Who may or may not be in the country illegally, but also to certainly people who, and this is the thing, the of 330 people that ICE rounded up on one as of I think yesterday. Would you like to know how many of them had a criminal record, Chris?
Well, I would love to know.
115.
Oh no! What happened to the other?
Oh, they were just all not criminals. They had no criminal record. They were just people who were in the country without proper documentation. So mothers, children, people work for a living. Yeah. And 115 of them had some criminal record. It's not clear whether that means things like, murder or theft or, moving violations. Ticket. Right, exactly. So either way, if 2/3 of the people you're picking up have no criminal record, you're obviously not targeting criminals. This is not about going after criminals. This is not about public safety. This is purely about, basically going after a big section of the California population that, to be quite frank, the California economy depends on.
Well, and that creates this other problem. So I'm sure you may have heard of today, probably happened last night, our time, that Trump started backing down on a lot of these expulsions and these deportations and these mass group snatching of people.
Yeah,
because clearly the farmers and these other rich people must have gotten on the phone to him or Stephen Miller and said, "What the hell are you doing?
Yeah,
we won't have any food in 6 weeks. You're picking up all the people who pick up our food. You're picking up all the people who do our basic work for us because none of you lazy bastards want to do it. And so unless you're going to force people to get into the fields, which America tried that for about 250 years. So let's say 200.
Yeah, I think. I would like to say that we decided as a society that we weren't going to do that anymore, but I think that would be overly
that was by force. That was by force, and frankly, they let the losing side who wanted slavery to exist live. So that idea never.
We let them keep their land as well, which slight issue there.
We didn't take away their power or their money, and we let them hang out so they could build statues to themselves. So anyway, so basically. What's happening is that I think Taco is about to happen, where Trump is about to back off this massive deportation effort because again they're trying to go for numbers, which I think is ridiculous. If your argument is that we have to get a certain amount of people out of the country every year, it's like the argument here in the UK. We've got to slow down all these small boats from coming over, but we're not going to do anything that's actually going to stop them. We're just going to keep on pumping money into France, into Greece, into other countries, and maybe they'll stop them. But they don't have to. If they don't stop them, there's no penalty. If they don't stop them, do we still keep paying them money? And how are they going to stop them? Because they don't want them. It's like the only way to stop people coming over, just slight digression here, and is to create enough ways for them to get into the country legally from where they are, right? As opposed to having to run all the way across Europe to get to safety. And the same goes for America. A lot of people run from South America or other countries across the Darien Gap all the way through Central America, because there's just no other way to do it. You can't just walk into their local consulate or embassy and be like, "Hi, I'd like asylum, please." I'll just walk back outside and get shot for even walking in the building.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is I think this is one of the real issues here, right? Like, if you're actually trying to reduce the amount of immigration into first world countries from countries that are, less developed or less safe or less stable, right? There's really two ways that you can do it. Number one, you can make your country a horrible fucking place to live, so no one wants to go there, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's true.
Kind of great. Get rid of all the pull factors, as we call it in the political science business.
Yeah.
So just make America broke and poor and violent and unstable, and then people in Honduras are going to be like, "Well, I already got that here. Why go to America?" Right? Yeah. Although I think most people in the United States may prefer not to follow that. I mean, there's some people who I'm sure would be like, "Great, as long as I never have to deal with someone who doesn't speak English again, I will live in grinding poverty."
A brown person. You're just speaking English. Nobody in the Republican in the MAGA party has issue with Swedish immigration. You know what I mean?
That's a good point, actually. If you really wanted to go after illegal immigrants, you would go after the Irish in New York. And for some reason, they are not doing that. Funny. Huh.
Well, yeah. And so there are a lot of these issues here, but basically what we're seeing, I think, to kind of close this section out is there's a bigger problem than just, deploying the National Guard, as what Trump has done last week.
Yeah.
So the issue is that they keep on using what we said before, rhetoric, to attempt to create a political environment where they can then try to enact the Insurrection Act or create a system where constitutional rights are suspended, but and therefore they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Like they're trying, it's very obvious that's where they're heading with this, is to say, oh, there are protests in cities across America, which apparently tomorrow there are going to be nationwide protests.
Yeah, the No Kings protest, which is sort of it's counter programming in a sense to Donald Trump's massive birthday bash / parade of tanks down the street of Washington, D.C., which, is not a thing that any American president has ever fucking done before.
Whoa, slow down. This is a parade for the military, you big old lefty liberal, and it just happens to be at on the exact same day as Trump's birthday. And you know what? That's just a coincidence. And just because he's a draft dodger who never went to war doesn't mean that he can't have tanks saluting him as he goes by. And and side note, he went to Fort Bragg and he gave this big, ridiculous, rambling speech in front of a hand-selected group of troops who were all on the same page as him. That on its own, impeachable.
Oh, yeah. No, that is absolutely politicizing the military. It is 100% a thing that has never been done in American history. It is absolutely the kind of thing that is a prelude to dictatorship. One of the things and I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a Hitler reference. Oh, hooray. No. We finally get our first Hitler reference of the day. The thing is, right, when as part of the process of seizing complete control as, the leader of Germany, basically, one of the things that Hitler did was he had the Wehrmacht, the sort of military of Republican Germany, declare personal loyalty to him. Not to the Constitution and not to the state, but to him as an individual.
Yeah.
And people, generally speaking, who study this kind of stuff, they're very clear when you have a military, that military's loyalty cannot be to an individual if you're going to have a republic. The whole point of a republic is that the government is the common property of the people.
Yeah.
It's not the property of a single person. This is in distinction to a monarchy, where the government is theoretically the personal property of the monarch, because the monarch is the proprietor, the owner of the country as a whole. Now, obviously, this is not how we would describe things in the United Kingdom. where there is, in fact,
totally
a monarch.
different. Yeah,
exactly. Well, that's the thing, because Britain had a whole civil war about literally exactly that. And let's just say that absolutist rule by all-powerful kings, that was not the side that won.
No, it wasn't. I believe that side lost its head. So,
it sure did. It sure did.
I mean, and also, and of course, there are two different determinations of sovereignty and with the power of the monarchy in England versus Scotland. Because in England,
Absolutely.
monarchy is determined, the sovereignty is of the land, and the king is sovereign of the land. Where in Scotland, the people are sovereign and they cede that sovereignty to the monarch.
Right.
So even within the United Kingdom, the concept
there are different conceptions
of the monarchy, and therefore that's why there are several kinds of law.
Exactly. But one thing that we do see as sort of a holdover of the monarchical system in the United Kingdom is that how is it that a prime minister is put into power, Chris?
The prime minister is put in place by the king. The king says the prime minister is not elected. They just happen to be the leader of the largest party or group of parties in the House of Commons. So there's absolutely no way for an individual to directly elect the head of government, because that's the king's job. The king says, I think that you can get my government through the House of Commons, and therefore you, on using my name and my power, can run the country on my behalf.
Exactly.
Do you accept? And it's all perfunctory, right? So,
that's the thing, and that's exactly right. And even when the king gives the speech to open Parliament, the king's speech to Parliament is not written by the king, is it, Chris?
No, it's written by the government. The government tells the king what to say, and then he reads it, and he doesn't deviate at all. So, so there you are. We've slightly drifted away.
Look, I have a point. I have a point.
Oh, we're coming back from the forest.
We're taking it back.
Diversion,
we're circling it back.
Getting back onto the main path here.
Yeah. So the idea here, right, is that even in constitutional monarchies, there's clearly we've moved away from this idea of like the government being the personal property of a single individual, right? Yeah. Republics, by their very definition, are against this interpretation of power altogether. You cannot have the powers of the government being the personal property of any individual. Instead, people who wield power in a republic are exercising that power on behalf of the people, on behalf of the sovereign entity, which is the people itself, right?
That's right.
So in the case of the United States, presidents cannot be the people who own the money in the treasury.
Right.
They have the power to spend that money, but only as they're directed to by Congress.
Yeah.
So in the context of the United States, which, by the way, the Constitution guarantees that every state will have a Republican form of government. Yeah. This is very much the foundation of how American constitutionality works.
Yeah.
Presidents have no power once they cease being president because they're not exercising the office.
Right.
So for Donald Trump to use the military as if it was his own private property, right? Yeah. To determine, I'm gonna decide which troops get to be in the audience when I speak to them. Yeah. He is not using it's an abuse of power, basically. And you're right, it's an impeachable offense.
It's beyond abuse of power. I mean, this should never have been allowed in the State Department, the Defense Department, and the Secretary of Defense should have been like, go to hell. But of course, the Secretary of Defense is a boozed out idiot. So we can't rely on, obviously, the cabinet holding him back. So that's where we are for this part on kind of rhetoric and things that are going on in the States. We'll have to wait and see. I think by next week, hopefully we're at the same point, but a lot will have likely changed by the time we talk again after this weekend full of protests with the No King protest. And of course, there's the Trump's personal birthday parade. And he's promised to have a go. I mean, to really go after any protester that turns up to his parade, which of course is a violation of the First Amendment.
Well, that's the thing. He has threatened violence against people who protest his birthday. And that is an abuse of power. That is unconstitutional. Under the Constitution, people have the right to peaceably assemble and petition their government. They have the right to protest. They have freedom of speech. This is not a real live legal debate. What we are seeing here is basically the overthrow of the constitutional order in a way that is insanely dangerous. And I will close out with this bit of news. The Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. she gave a press conference recently in which she announced that the use of the National Guard, the use of federal troops, including 700 Marines, Chris, to maintain order, and I'm putting that in a hell of a lot of air quotes, in California, that this is going to last for quite some time, and that the purpose is to relieve California of its socialist government.
Yeah.
And when the Democratic senator for California, Alex Padilla, attempted to ask a question at a press conference, she ordered the police who were there, I think they were federal troops or federal police, to detain him. So they grab him, they bring him out of the room, they throw him to the floor, and they handcuff him. He has committed no crime. He is a United States senator. He has every right to question the actions of the executive at a press conference where the point is for Kristi Noem to answer questions. So this is about as illegal an act as you can get. It is 100% an unconstitutional abuse of power. And I think it's a real indication of just where this is going, and where it's going is not good.
Yeah, that is that, and that did happen just I think yesterday on the 12th of June.
Things are moving fast, yeah.
But things are moving fast. But the fact that she's saying that our job is to overthrow the government of California. And she'll just say it's hyperbole, and she'll go back to saying it's rhetoric until it's not.
Yeah, and that I think is a nice way to tie this all up in a nice bow. Well done, Chris.
No problem. Yeah. So we're going to take a little break here, and then we are going to be right back.
All right, with more joy and sunshine to spread to the internet. We'll see you then.
All right. And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. Even more chaos for us to put into some vague semblance of order for you. And I think, Chris, that you wanted to talk about something a little bit closer to home.
Well, yeah. I mean, we talk about America a lot because that's where, if it collapses, we have issues, and we don't know week to week on where that's going. But overall, we need to talk about what's going on in the UK. Now, over the past several years, just like in the United States, United Kingdom, there have been protests, and they haven't been, all about the racial aspect that you would find in America, but things like Just Stop Oil or, anti-Brexit, pro-Palestinian.
Exactly. In favor of insulating homes.
In favor of insulation homes, and there's also protests against the congestion charge or the ultra low emission zones. I mean, we have plenty of protests, but it seems that we don't really care about the ones that are focused on right wing issues. The ones that are left wing issues are the ones that we need to have a very long conversation about. So, give you two examples here. Pro-Palestinian protests, which are I want to say 99.9999% peaceful. The only time I ever heard of it not being peaceful was a separate protest, like around the corner and down the street, not related to the main protest. And that wasn't even a violent protest. It was just a guy who shouldn't have been talking. I think he was on a list, if you will, who should not have been in public saying the things he was saying. That's separate from the main protest. But you have people like Just Stop Oil. They were throwing, water-based paints on paints.
Onto the glass panels in front of the paintings.
That's right.
Causing no damage to the artwork itself, but getting a hell of a lot of headlines out of it.
And of course, they also did. They like to chain themselves to the sides of highways, and then basically stop all traffic on highways. Now, we can have a whole thing about Just Stop Oil, who've recently shut down their protesting plans because the Labour government have seemingly done something that they liked. However, but let's compare that to things like the protests about the Southport killings, where people were right-wing protesters were trying to burn down asylum seeker hotels, or what happened in Ballymena this weekend. I wasn't here, so Patrick knows more about that. But we have two very different types of protests. One that are annoying and will slow people down. Very
disruptive. Economic costs are imposed. And I think a strong argument can be had about whether or not the game is worth the candle on those kind of protests.
Absolutely. And then you have the other protests, which are deadly and attempted murder.
Arson. So I feel like there's a slight difference
There is a slight difference.
One of these things, Chris, is not like the other.
No, one of these things is not like the other. However, the UK has the previous UK governments, which were conservative, have found ways to deal with them. And as a normal disclaimer, I currently work for the Scottish National Party Westminster Group in the House of Commons. But
your opinions are whose, Chris?
Mine.
There we go.
My opinions are mine. But why don't you take us through what happened in Ballymena over the weekend, because it is another in succession of dangerous. It's a riot. It's not even a protest.
Well,
these are riots.
And that's the thing. I think we need to be. I think we can make the distinction at this point between protests, which may involve, and sort of like as an auxiliary matter on the fringes of it, some elements of property destruction, and riots, which at their very core are geared towards threats to life and to public order, right? And in Ballymena, it certainly seems like it's certainly the latter that has been happening. So several days ago, two 14-year-old boys who are apparently Romanian immigrants were arrested and charged with attempted sexual assault of a young woman. I believe a woman who was underage as well.
Right.
Now, obviously, this is not a great situation. This is terrible. And if they have in fact, that's the thing. And if they are proved in a court of law to have committed that crime, then, there's law for that. Yeah. Right? Like there are punishments. Yeah. Like we got a whole judicial system just for such an occasion, which, is good. Now, you may be asking yourself, okay, well, then what exactly is the issue? And of course, the issue is because they were Romanian immigrants, that meant that a whole lot of people decided in their locality that what they needed to do was to get the immigrants out of their community, because the problem is immigrants and the problem is not these two boys having committed a criminal act, potentially. Right. So the end result was that in Ballymena, in Northern Ireland, in a working class Protestant area, a bunch of the inhabitants of that area basically decided to go around smashing the windows and threatening the lives of immigrants who live in the area. So people attacking their neighbors. Yeah. And we have more than one situation in which, certainly one situation in which a family was hiding upstairs in the attic as the crowd and mob was right outside their front door. Again, this is their home. The door was bolted, obviously. So what do? Well, they broke the windows, and then they threw in a firebomb with presumably the intent to kill everyone in the dwelling, and potentially other people who live in a connected dwelling to that. Because, that's the thing about fire, Chris. It's fire not fire. Fire isn't
racist. So fire doesn't really care what it burns. So I mean, again, I'm just catching up on it now, but I mean, these are some, compared to the Just Stop Oil protests of, people chaining themselves up or gluing themselves to the top of a tube train or something. We are talking about here that people in these neighborhoods have to put up signs in the windows that say, "We are locals. We are British nationals. Please don't burn down our house." Exactly. So they're going from house to house, thinking basically. And imagine that they get it wrong, just like with the Trump stuff. Imagine they just they pick the wrong house and they say, "I know people live there," but of course you don't have to know somebody lives there. You can just say that they live there. And that could be somebody you don't like. Oh, there's a bunch of immigrants in that house. Let's burn it to the ground. Right? Yeah, and then I'll finally be able to claim that spot of their garden by moving my fence over, because they'll all be dead, and that way I can, adverse possession. It'll be great. And that is a riot, and that is a collapse of social order. Yeah, and yet it's an absolute terrible scene when you see people, like, especially in a place like Northern Ireland, where you definitely know what side of an argument people are on. They have murals, they have flags. It's a whole thing. I think, I mean, they have a lot of identity politics going on out there. Quite a bit. Yeah. Quite a bit. Although it's interesting you bring that up, because this particular riot appears to be working at cross purposes to the normal, I say normal, but actually horrifying, sectarian divide between Catholic and Protestant Northern Irish people. Yeah. Because while this riot occurred in a Protestant working class area, apparently some of the people involved in the riots, although people who are, not, we don't have any reason to think committed any of the crimes themselves, but we're speaking to reporters about the experience, said that they were heartened to see
people coming in from the Catholic areas to support the riots. And they saw.
Do you mean support protecting people from the riots, or to be part of the riots?
To riot, to engage in riot, to attack immigrants. Protestants and Catholics coming together in order to attack immigrants, to kill the Romanians. Right. Yeah, so this the Protestant person who was speaking to I believe the Guardian reporter about this spoke of it as a real moment of people coming together, bridging the sectarian divide.
Wow. And this goes back to what we were saying before about rhetoric and about how people talk about different political ideology, political ideals. You have, there's nothing. Okay, so 2 immigrants are accused of this crime, right? Mm-hmm. And therefore, people have to go out and firebomb and shatter as many immigrant communities as they can find. But I guarantee you, over the last week, that a local person, will put it like that, will have been accused of a similar or same crime, and we wouldn't have even heard about it. Mm-hmm. So it's who is fanning these flames and who is trying to make hay or who is trying to get the most capital out of this destruction. I've been in America, so I haven't been watching all of it. But I mean, some of these pictures are just absolutely horrific. And to think about, no one really knows where everybody's from. And you have, riot police out there, water cannons are being used. And what everyone has to pay for the crimes or the alleged crimes of these two kids. Or I don't know how old these Romanian guys
were. They were 14 years old.
So they're 14-year-old boys, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is getting pretty ridiculous. But it does bring us out. Do you think, Patrick, that there's going to be any new laws written to address these? Because we've had the Ballymena riots, we had the Southport riots. Any new laws written to adjust to account for these things?
Well, I've got sort of a 2-part answer on that, Chris. And in the first case, well, no, because that stuff's already against the law, right? Like if you attempt to kill someone by burning down their flat, that is, arson and attempted murder. Like there's already laws against this. It is illegal to engage in riot. So I don't think any new legislation would be needed in that sense, Chris. Right. And the second part of my response is that they already passed a law, but it wasn't geared against that. It wasn't an anti-rioting law. No. They passed a really draconian law against the first type of protests where people do annoying things that have an economic impact but don't threaten life and limb. And that is the Public Safety Act of 2023. Sorry, the Public Order Act of 2023.
I do remember this. Going to the House.
Yep. Yeah, you may have heard a little bit about this. So this is fun because this starts imposing new laws radically restricting what you can do when you protest. So they created an offense of locking on, that is basically chaining or attaching yourself to something to make it hard to move you away, basically. That's quite interesting, actually, because in Britain, there was a very famous example of someone using that very act as a protest, and very effectively. And this was during the fight for women's enfranchisement, for giving women the right to vote. Right. There was a woman who chained herself to one of the statues inside of Parliament.
Oh, you're talking. Yes. Okay. It wasn't just one woman. It was a group of women who chained themselves to Lord Falkland's statue, I think. And they broke part of the statue, and then they had to use bolt cutters to get her off the statue. And when they used the bolt cutters broke, and they charged her for the bolt cutters and arrested her. So
that's impressive.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes, you're right. Locking yourselves onto things is a huge part of protest in general. It is mostly harmless, doesn't involve setting fire to anyone's house. Doesn't involve killing anybody. It's just annoying. And that's the point. The point is that it's annoying.
Exactly. And so a bunch of actions basically have now become, instead of being something where it's like, okay, well, you're engaged in trespass and, you refuse to leave. And so, well, that's, at a certain point that becomes criminal trespass and we could charge you under that. Or saying, all right, well, like you're causing trouble for public order, and so that's going to lead to a fine, or there's a dispersal order, so now you got to go home, which are things that have a much longer existence in British statute and common law, right?
Yes.
Here we have specifically criminal charges being created against these otherwise acts that will be dealt with basically under much less draconian responses. So what's interesting here then is this: the protests which are peaceful but annoying have been dealt with much more draconianly by the Tory government, and currently under the Labour government, than one could argue has been sort of dealt with by when it comes to dealing with these sort of riots. And I think part of the reason is that we already have the laws to deal with riots. Everyone knows that riots are illegal.
I disagree. Only in this one area is, and as you were speaking, I remembered this, is that, okay, so for a long time, probably from 2022, 2023, Just Stop Oil was doing a lot of stuff. And they were painting the sides of buildings orange, and they were going after all sorts of stuff. But they were doing it at, like, for me, in my opinion, a lot of the wrong places. They were attacking. They were basically trying to slow down the tube. They were trying to shut down the M25.
The DLR, gluing yourself to the top of the Docklands Light Railway to make people
that was the Jubilee line. It was a Jubilee line, but it was at Canning Town, which has a DLR. So because I saw the guy, and people are like, "Why are you protesting against us? We are the ones trying to go to work using public transport. So why are you doing this, right?" And so they got incredible. So it was getting more and more annoying, and so they created this Public Order Act, and it wasn't just about Just Stop Oil. There was a guy named Steve. Winwood, not Steve Winwood, but there's somebody there's a guy who's anti-Brexit. His name is Steve, and he's been outside before.
Yeah, I've seen him around actually,
and he always has a loudspeaker and basically he creates a lot of noise and havoc outside of Parliament, especially during the Brexit debates and stuff. But the Tories hated him, so they basically created a law specifically for him that you could no longer be loud. You could no longer put like a loud protest on, or else that's against the law. So they created all these specific carve-outs effectively for these left-wing protests. Within the same time frame of a conservative government, I understand there are several prime ministers during that time, they created nothing bespoke for Southport.
No.
They created nothing bespoke for the violence that happened under their watch during this thing on this specific issue, but they created a bespoke thing for Brexit Steve. They created a bespoke thing for Just Stop Oil, right?
That's the thing, because they had to, because that stuff wasn't illegal before. That was legal and acceptable protest that was understood to be like part of the rights that British people have as British citizens. So it's quite disturbing that we've seen this kind of like weaponization of the law against peaceful protest. And at the same time, the people who haven't been targeted by this kind of like, governmental focus, extreme right-wing rioters, people engaged in, perfectly willing to engage in murder and perfectly happy to support people who are engaged in attempted murder. One of the really disheartening things about that news article that I read was that the people they were talking to were flat out saying, "Oh, yeah, well, maybe we'll get some people who aren't, who, we didn't want to get and whatnot. But the important thing is we got to get all the immigrants out, except for that family that I know. They're fine. They shouldn't have had their windows smashed. And the people who were responsible, they did come and apologize and tell them that they could stay," which, I have no response to that other than to say that's mighty white of them. And I mean that in the worst possible way.
Yeah, no, that's and that's what it's all about, though. It's about, being angry at a number of things and knowing that your community is changing. And you no longer know several generations of the same kind of family in the same kind of street. But that's right. I mean, again, it's about opportunities, right? We need people who are too busy to riot. We need people who got other stuff going on where they can be upset or protest, but you need to be too upset. You need to be too busy to go out there and say, "Listen, I know how to make a firebomb. I'm going to start throwing stuff out there."
Right.
It is.
I think you're right. Part of it has to do with the fact that I feel like successive governments have not been very good at dealing with legitimate social problems that have arisen. The cost of housing crisis, the fact that the cost of living is going up, the lack of an answer to how do you deal with areas that used to be industrially, based, where their economies were based in industry, and now those industries are gone, and not enough new industries have arisen to take their place. I think that there's huge ways, I think, in which governments have failed at their basic job of like solving society's problems as they come up. And one of the things that happens when you fail to do that is that pressure builds and eventually it erupts. And it's not going to erupt against the people who caused the problem in the first place. It's going to
No,
erupt against people who cannot defend themselves.
of course. I
Yeah.
mean, no matter where you are, the highest amount of anti-immigrant immigration sentiment is in areas with the lowest amount of immigration.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what's ridiculous is that you have these areas and we have governments who are willing to create the Public Order Act, right?
Yeah.
But they're not willing to figure out how to make the tax system more fair so that you can get more resources into these areas that, you know, may not have used to have a large industrial base. I mean, Belfast was known for making ships.
Right.
I think I don't know if they still have shipyards there. I'm sure they must.
I mean, I think there are some, but like those shipyards are nowhere near the focus of shipbuilding that they used to be, and they're certainly nowhere near the kind of employers that they used to be.
Well, yeah, because that was like 120. That was 100 years ago, 120, 10 or 20 years ago, where they used, you know, a lot of these areas that grew up, you know, during the Victorian era and the end of the Victorian era, they haven't been able to replace the industry or the economic drivers there. Yeah. And you need to be able to create independent economic drivers in a lot of different parts of your country, or else the country just isn't going to work. Well, so I don't know that much about the spending review that's just come down, but I've been watching a few things about it. And the UK spends more money than it earns, which is a thing that countries do, right? If you want to build ships, it's going to cost you a lot of money, so you need to borrow some money for that. But you know, then one of the fears from that spending review is that they might have to the Labour government might have to raise taxes. Then the first thing that popped in my head is, well, who do you raise those taxes upon? Right. Because you've already raised taxes on national insurance contributions, right? So who is left to take the burden of the taxes? And it's never the ultra wealthy.
Yeah, they always seem to get a little pass on that, don't they?
They always there's always a way for them to hide their money that no one else can, but they have most of it. So if you were to say to a billionaire, you know, you got to pay $10 million or pounds in taxes to a billionaire, that's a lot of money. But you're a billionaire. So
that would be, let's see, what would that would be 1% of the money that you have. Now, if you're talking like every year you pay 1% of your total wealth, that would be a wealth tax.
That would be,
and obviously that would be quite a thing. But if you are talking about an income tax, which, you know, we all frickin' pay, it's not crazy to say, well, if you're making millions a year, you should pay a higher tax rate than someone who's making, you know, tens of thousands a year.
But as you know, income tax isn't where the rich keep their money. Like basically the rich to pay their taxes in capital gains. They pay their taxes somewhere else. Their money isn't in the same place as our money is, right?
Right. Well, that's saying they're not employed. They get their money from owning things. And I like one argument is, equalize the tax rates between, income and capital gains. Like if the money is coming in, why are we saying, well, if you get it from not working, you get taxed less than if you get it from actually working for a living? Why are we punishing work and rewarding, idleness? It's a puzzlement.
And if we can't sort out, the West cannot sort out this problem, because obviously there are people who oppose the ultra wealthy. The other thing that jumped into my head, which brings us back to the riots and right wingism and all that, is, if there's a time, which won't be that far away, that the Labour government have to raise taxes at the same, but not increase or do anything more for public services, right? Noting that they just U-turned on winter fuel payments,
which
I think far too late. The cat's out of the bag with that one. The voters have already disappeared, and now they're looking for a new savior, a new singular leader. And if you're going to be raising taxes with this specter of winter fuel payments cuts and all this other stuff, it's they are creating the perfect soil for which Nigel Farage to plant himself with an already big tree.
Yeah, and he already is doing that. He already is basically claiming left-wing economics to go with extreme right-wing social positions, basically.
Which is all nuts. He's going to come in, he's going to do exactly what Trump did, right? Or he's going to pull Liz Truss and be a Trump. He's going to destroy the economy and try to create a world that is so hostile to immigrants, but to keep him in power. So we'll have to do whatever we can to make sure that he isn't elected. But that brings us back to Ballymena. And if I have, enough to do, I can be upset, I can go protest, I can go to the court, I can talk to my friends about it, but I don't see myself setting fire to every immigrant community in my community.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for any of that. It's just,
that's the thing.
Just banditry. It's just rioting. It's criminality, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. In circumstances like that, if you are someone who is, doesn't consider yourself to be bound by the law, if you're of a criminal bent, as one might say, this is a perfect opportunity. Holy crap. Yeah. Other people are angry about immigrants. That's blah, blah, blah. Now I get to set some fires. And maybe I get to smash some windows, and maybe I get to vent my frustration and my anger, or I don't know, maybe I get to grab some stuff. Who knows? But it's one of the reasons why if you are in power, you want to work really hard to not have riots happen in the first place.
Yeah.
Because, and I think this links us to one last thing I would like to mention, and it's a real example of someone whose political rhetoric span massively out of control, and I think is causally connected to some of these attempted murders that's been happening in the north of Ireland.
Okay.
So there is a member of the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland. He is the communities minister, so he's in the cabinet, and his name is Gordon Lyons. Now, after the Ballymena riots started happening, some people fled, and they went to a community center in a nearby town, the Larne Leisure Center, where they've been offered some shelter. Now, this DUP minister finds out that that's where they are, and he puts out a tweet on X, apparently, saying they're here, they're being kept at this leisure center, and while obviously all protests should be peaceful and whatnot, they're over there. Now, so what is it that happens? Well, rioters go and they try to burn the place down while children are inside.
Of course, because they're not people. So you realize immigrants aren't people, Patrick.
Right, exactly. Well, but there were local Irish people in there as well. So, Irish kids might have been killed along with kids who live in Ireland but may not be ethnically Irish. So what a tragedy that would have been, obviously. But yeah, so this is this guy, obviously the Sinn Féin, the SDLP, and the everyone is calling for this guy to resign, and he is very much refusing to resign. But this is a man who, in a bid to gain some extra political support, put the lives of children at risk and managed to get someone to try to kill them because his political rhetoric will simply, I'm sure he saw it as, I'm not to be taken literally, but I am to be taken seriously. And what we're seeing is that, well, sometimes people take you literally, dude.
Yeah. And you can't, and you shouldn't be allowed to use that excuse to get out of, you should have kept your mouth shut if you know that they were under threat. You're their representative as well. And I mean, obviously he's not going to resign. Obviously he needs to be fired. But, we'll see where this gets to, because obviously there are politics that we won't have, an issue on. We won't have an opinion on, and all opinions are my own. I'll say that again. But, we need to be very careful about the things that we say. Especially if you're in a position, if you're in the government like he is, or in a position of power. Because people will use your words to justify their actions. And even if you don't think that they will, that's what's going to happen. So either own up and say, I wanted to get the immigrants killed so that I can, get 30 more votes in my constituency, a pat on the back at the local pub, or you need to say, I made a mistake and I got to go. I should have known better. So, that's probably a good place to wrap this up for now.
I feel the dark cloud of political despair lowering upon my house, and I should probably go, I don't know, like grab a broom to like sweep it away or something like that. So,
yeah, well, maybe you should get a VR headset and just put yourself in a different world. I don't know.
Hey, you say that, but I am a gamer of some renown. Join my Twitch channel. No, I don't know.
Join our Twitch channel, guys. I'm pretty sure we're too old for Twitch, and we're not pretty enough for Twitch. So,
oh my God, in no way am I pretty enough. I don't have a face for Twitch, people. I just want to put that out there right now. No, I got a face for radio.
We got a face for radio, barely you two.
Yeah.
So as you know, as we continue on with this podcast, we're going to keep it going for as long as we can.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep expanding it. So keep eye out for us, keep an ear out for us.
Exactly.
And as always, I'm Dr. Silverstein.
I'm Dr. Armshaw.
And we are doctors,
but not doctors.
Good night.